Hey, welcome to the 320th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode was brought to you by patron Erica Green. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Warren Kaplan, and today we have our old friend. She's almost
Ancient.
30. Carlyn Hudson back on the pod. And we're going to talk treatments. It's what we were going to do last week until one of the three of us came down with COVID for some reason.
Not naming names, starts with an O.
I felt like last week I said one of the two of us got COVID, and I could feel like a palpable nervousness from Matt about people maybe thinking it was him.
If you're like going into an office and stuff? No.
No, I'm not.
No, just because he would be nervous about that type of thing.
I think Oren might be projecting here.
Generally.
But then Jamie Sadler, one of our listeners, sent me a message and said, I hope you're feeling okay. So
Aw.
I guess it was clear. Okay, Matt, so don't worry.
Regular listeners, perhaps.
You're still hireable. Anyhow,
How are you feeling, Oren? You're feeling better, though.
I'm feeling pretty great, except for I'm just stuck at my house. I'm still testing positive.
Oof.
So I have to keep waiting. And because I'm testing positive, like the kids aren't going to school, the nanny's not coming. It's just a total mayhem. I have a shoot next week. I have to leave. So I have a week to be 100% clean.
Hope you're drinking your green juice and stuff.
Anyhow, I'm going to be very happy when it's all behind us. And before we hop into treatments, we were asking about them last week. We have some really great questions from Twitter. We were going to just catch up just for a few minutes. Matt, you want to tell us what you've been working on lately and what you have on your mind?
What I have on my mind, I haven't been working on it. I was thinking, I'm sure everyone's aware, Unreal Engine 5 just dropped not that long ago.
Carlyn, I heard you got a tattoo or something.
Pretty excited about it, Carlyn.
Commemorating it?
Is this like another bagel hack or something?
No. Unreal Engine 5 is for real. It's the 3D software that powers most video games, but also more importantly, virtual productions, not unlike The Mandalorian. But there's a lot of people who are kind of figuring out ways to implement virtual productions in a way smaller scale.
And a ton of DPs are really into it for Previz and doing all sorts of cool things. Yeah,
there's a lot of genuine practical things that you can do with it, because basically it works not unlike a video game in real time. And like it's got like just this massive library of different assets that you can use for free. So like if you need New York, blop, it's in your computer ready to go. And you can previs all over the place with it and drop in your avatar, metahumans, whatever, and get things going. So and you can, with a little bit of gear, you can map it to a camera, so you can be like live keying things. There's all sorts of fun stuff to do with it.
Like you can hold your iPhone as if it's a camera, and then it will,
Yeah, we all get to pretend to be James Cameron now, thanks to Unreal Engine 5.
Wow.
Basically, Oren, you're a big Blender advocate.
Blenderhead.
I always love to, like, if I'm doing some busy work, I'll throw a tutorial on and kind of in the background, just to kind of like be conversant, understand the fundamentals, just have like that tool in my toolbox in the future, right? And with 3D, it takes a little bit more than just kind of listening passively. It's worth it to kind of crack the program open and really kind of like noodle around a little bit. And so my question is, for the uninitiated, to Oren, is it more important for Blender or Unreal based off of where people are in the industry now? What will be more useful in the future? And for Carlyn, is any of that important to you personally? Do you know what I mean? As a working director who, works on all sorts of different sizes of budgets, but plenty of big budgets,
Huge. No.
Doing well, doing good stuff. Like VFX are a thing that you have to talk about and work through and previs with people. Is software ever a part of the conversation for you? What language are you speaking when you're trying to communicate with artists who are actually implementing the ideas in whatever software they're using?
The VFX work that I've done is pretty simple, to be honest, so far. I haven't really been, I guess, given the opportunity or created an opportunity for myself to do super heavy VFX stuff. So I just don't have a reason to really dive into it yet. But I bet if I had a project that would require it, I would do it. So I just haven't needed it yet.
That makes complete sense. I think there is that evolution of like starting with things simply and then realizing, oh, there are ways that I can plus or embellish even simple shots with VFX now that it's part of my process. Like, like the company that I'm working with now, effectively, I know that every single shot is going to go through an After Effects paint team. So like, I'm not worried about the weird blemish on the wall anymore because I know someone's going to clean it up. Or like, more importantly, like I can do a virtual set extension if it's teeny tiny and not super involved. Or do like a sky replacement is something that's been handy. It's been gloomy the last couple months. So like, just knowing like, oh, okay, I know we wrote that there was going to be a nice sunset right now. So we'll light for that, even if the sky is totally blown out.
And it helps you to previs in this program to show the team how it's going to look.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the many different things. But people are using it for full shots as well. It is the thing that like powers the Mandalorian volume walls, so like those virtual sets are all built in Unreal, for instance.
Yeah, I was just watching the new Russian Doll thinking, wow, how did they conceptualize all of this? And I'm sure it was through the use of one of these programs too.
I mean, I guess my point of view as a director, like the value of a program like Blender or Unreal. Like Matt said, there's a million different things, and I think every director would find value in some of them. Obviously, doing visual effects or kind of full shots that are going to be in your final product is probably the least likely thing that any of us will do, unless we're doing an animated piece or something like that. But what I use it a ton for is for Previz, so basically like laying out my location and, the spot I'm shooting in a couple of weeks that I was talking to you guys about. I've already started like building out this warehouse in Blender and trying to figure out where I would put these different areas. And once I've done that, I can start putting camera lenses up. And, Matt had an idea about some interesting angles. So I could start trying to find those, and knowing the dimensions of my location, I can know what lenses I would need when I'm talking to the DP and like maybe what some of the difficulties of lighting might be. And so just in order to plan out shoots and stuff, I find it really helpful. On the pre-getting the job section, like I just did a treatment last week where we're supposed to shoot in this supermarket, but we can't get a supermarket because of where we have to shoot the second part of the day. So we have to build part of a supermarket, and I was pitching a set extension, where, like Matt said, where we make one wall a green screen. So we just build a little tiny corner of the supermarket, but behind our actors, you'll see like the big supermarket behind them. We pitched it to the agency, and of course I built the corner in Blender, and I put our characters there, and I put a green screen, and then I showed them what it would look like in camera and then what it would look like once we extend it. And then they had us do a call with the post team, because the post team was like, how are we going to do the set extension? How's it going to work? And I showed them, I shared my screen. I walked them through my Blender set and everything. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. Now we totally get it. Green screen is going to be here. The shelf's going to be here. Just make sure that this thing isn't out of focus. I don't even have the job yet, but already I think I've proven to the agency that I can do this thing that seems maybe difficult, and they don't know necessarily if I can do it on the budget or not. But I'm showing them that I, like Matt said, I have the vocabulary and I know how to do it. And I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm going to shoot it in a way that it's going to be very much doable.
So my question is not, are 3D products helpful for people in all sorts of different ways? My question is,
which one? Because
the problem I have with Blender is that it's pretty incomprehensible from a interface perspective. Everything's a hotkey. None of it makes a ton of sense. There's a million submenus. Like when you crack open Premiere or you crack open Photoshop, there's a commonality between those programs. So even if you're not especially comfortable in one or the other, you can kind of figure it out with a little bit of time. Blender, it's like a new language, frankly. And I thought, well, if I'm starting from scratch, does Unreal, which is, I think, a little bit more user-friendly, does that make more sense?
First of all, 3D software in general just has a really big learning curve, because it's nothing like editing. It's not like Photoshop, and it's not like 3D, and it's not like layers and these very two-dimensional ways we're thinking of things. So the learning curve is really difficult. Blender is especially difficult. Maya is probably more difficult than Blender, as is 3D Studio Max. Probably the easiest one, quote unquote, is Cinema 4D, which is also very expensive.
Don't sleep on SketchUp, bro.
Yeah, that's not really anything anyone uses for what we're talking about. You would maybe lay out a set or something.
Lay out a set in SketchUp or something. Yeah.
And you could put
designers
the
use
cameras
SketchUp all the
there,
time,
and you can do that
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. But not really for rendering or lighting. I don't know how much lighting you can do there. But Unreal is equally, if not more complex than Blender, because there's an entire game engine part to it that is not. It's not like you can do just 3D stuff without the game engine. Like it's all built to support each other. So just the whole way you think about things, you think like After Effects of Blender is complicated. It's like even more complicated. On top of that, you can't model in Unreal. You can't make things. You bring models. So a lot of people use Blender and Unreal. Unreal, you can load existing models. You can load up textures. You can get all this free stuff.
Interesting.
And by the way, that free stuff, it's called the Megascans library from Epic Game. Basically one company owns all this stuff. They made it all free for everyone, and you can use those models in Blender too, not just in Unreal. That's why I think for filmmakers, Blender is free. There's an unlimited amount of resources to learn it. And it also has like great drawing tools if you are into storyboarding, like by hand drawing. We talked about that video in the past. So anyhow, it's all really complicated and would basically take another pandemic for someone to sit down and like learn how to use it all.
I know, that's why whenever you talk about this stuff, I'm like, wow. I mean, how many hours? But you also do VFX, so that's like one of your superpowers as a director is this stuff. Yeah,
I mean, I really enjoy it and I have fun with it. And I was a Cinema 4D person before, which I do really think is the easiest one from like click on the cube and you have a cube, and then you click on it and you can stretch it out.
Like drag it. Yeah. Hold this button to scale or whatever. Yeah.
Carlyn, I'm curious about like lenses and things. When you are planning out your shoot, talking to the DP, or even before you're talking to the DP, like, do you think more about shot size? Do you think about lens focal length? Are you like, oh, we should be really wide and low? Or are you like, oh, we should get like the 18 millimeter lens? How do you think about that stuff?
I mean, I do use Artemis, I'm sure many people do. So that's sort of like where I'll play around with different lenses and stuff. But I'm definitely thinking a lot. Right? That's like doing Scout. Yeah, on the Scout, I'll do that. And so then on the Scout, we can figure out, which lenses we like. And we might change our minds on the day. But I'm thinking about like angles and thinking about sort of like the big picture and sort of like generally what lens I want to use, unless it's a really specific shot, like this Roku Geico thing I just did is really visually super specific. So on that, like, it just has like a really interesting look, and we had like we had like a giant, what was our zoom? It was like 12 to 200 and something. It was like a giant.
24 to 290.
Huge. Yeah, that one. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think about lenses and angles.
I think as you're on set and like you start to see the different ways that a lens changes the image, I think that it just kind of pulls it all into focus. Pulls it all into focus.
I have this weird thing where I try to not shoot two shots that will cut with each other within, like, I always try to have them be at least 2 lens lengths away from each other. Like I try to.
You wouldn't do like a 35 and a 50 or something?
Yeah, or a 40 and a 50. Yeah. Or,
That's interesting. I'm not sure that would bother me at all.
I don't know. Just for me, I feel like I wouldn't want to go from a wide shot on a 50 to a close-up shot on a 50. I don't know why. I guess I just, I feel like it would maybe feel weird. Like we're not, like the camera hasn't moved or maybe it will feel very much like the camera has moved. I don't know. When someone's like, oh, we did that last shot on the 50 and they're like, let's try on the 40. I'll always try to go to like the 32 or whatever.
For sure, I will spend a whole spot on a 32 in particular. I feel like there's a handful of lenses that I like better. Basically, I like a super, like an 18, a 32, and a 50 are kind of like my favorites, basically, almost always. Or 32, 35, whatever the kit has.
Yeah. I guess I would count those as like 2 away from each other, like different enough from each other.
A 32 to a 50?
Yeah. But I guess, Matt, what you're saying is like you would have fun just shooting the whole thing on a 32.
100%. Yeah.
Like the super wide shot.
Certainly, I've intercut a 32 in between the wide on a 32 and a close up on a 32. For sure, I've done that.
If you ever shot anything on your iPhone, that's how you do it. too, right? Like you
Sure.
kind of just use that 1x lens.
A famously visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
I guess people do shoot on the iPhone now.
Yeah. I did like a campaign just recently where it was all kind of meant to be like testimonial style, like people talking, like FaceTiming their friends and all that stuff. And so a few of the people, a lot of it was shot remotely, but a few of them were in LA. And so I just went and was like, I'll just pull my phone out and shoot these instead of making them do it. And I showed my wife, Chrissy, the cut, and she was like, I don't know why people don't always just shoot on iPhones.
Really?
Like it doesn't look like an Alexa. I will say this, when the client saw it, they started, originally it was just going to be for OTT and like smart TVs and stuff, like a digital campaign, and they are looking into linear now because of it. And it's not like it's that good, you know what I mean? But it's just like, you get a ton of different cool shots. You're not thinking about it. You're not overthinking it.
Did you do cinematic mode?
No, I did not. It's intentional that everything should feel authentic and homemade
DIY.
and like DIY. So like cinematic mode would make it look too quote unquote cinematic. But like, I got up in there. I used all of the different lenses, and I was like, yeah, like
this is the new iPhone.
The new iPhone, yeah.
I don't have this iPhone. I gotta get it.
Carlyn, it is pretty nice.
Okay.
It is pretty nice. Anyway, so when it drops, it's a neat little spot, but like there is a world where you're like, yeah, this is kind of the future. I don't know why we spend.
I mean,
you can spend so much more money on media placement and just send one person and a cell phone and a list of questions.
For some things, they're really good.
Yeah.
But also, you need a great location with great lighting.
That is true.
Yeah.
On the 3D side of things, if you listeners have any opinions on anything, which software is best, the fact that directors should even waste their time getting into this, email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com.
As a final thing before we move on, I think if you two are the opposite ends of the spectrum, I'm like closer to the middle, like veering closer to Oren, but not like I've done VFX, but I would not ever expect to like try to do that as a side hustle. And I do find it helpful to be conversant, but not expect to like put my hands on the wheel or tell people how to do things, basically. But it's nice to have that vocabulary. And so that's where my head is at in terms of all tools, basically. Like, I'm not going to tell a DP how to do their job, but I do like to know what gear they're using and why they're using it, and like have an understanding myself of all of that. And that's true for all technicians. And so as 3D becomes more and more approachable on a smaller scale, I think it becomes more of an expectation to have at least an understanding. That's all.
Is this an intervention? Y'all just want me to get more?
No, Carlyn, you're doing great. It's
more just the programs.
No, don't, but not by any means. I keep thinking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. Right?
I have not seen it yet. Yeah.
It's great. It's literally an 8-person VFX team. It's over 200 VFX shots in that movie. The directors are 2 of the VFX people. You know what I mean? Which is cool. There's a lot of shots that are like, basic wire removal and compositing and stuff like that. And there's some heavy duty shots as well and some 3D. But the Daniels are an example of people who are using a set of tools that was not available to us for very long in DIY and like bootstrappy garage filmmaking ways on the big screen to great success.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. That's worth talking about on a podcast like this is all. To each their own, obviously. Everybody's got their own superpowers. As a person who's going to be listening to tutorials no matter what, I thought, well, which ones should I be listening to?
Well, let us know what you think, folks. We appreciate it. Okay, on to the main topic, treatments. So we talked about treatments a lot here. When I saw Adam Bricker, one of our listeners, the other day, I was lamenting to him that I had 4 treatments due that week and how much I hate treatments and writing treatments, which I realized I hate writing treatments when I don't get the job, but I love writing treatments when I do get the job.
You love writing treatments.
Adam said to me, he's like, it's so weird. Like, of all the people I know, you're the one that seems to love writing treatments the most, based solely on listening to your podcast. I don't know. Maybe I have a reputation for loving treatments.
Also, if this is a show about making a living as a director, this is one of the cleanest, most obvious, overt, actionable things that a person can get better at. That's, I think, probably a lot of the reason why we like to talk about them as well.
We're all equally capable of making a treatment. You know, the person that has no money that lives with their parents and us. I mean, sure, on occasion we might hire some people to help us make them look better, but in theory, most people have the tools to make a treatment, and the treatment is what gets you the job in a lot of these things. On top of your reel
and the phone call and the what you're pitching. You know,
but I mean, even in a more general, like the feature, the short film, the actor, the thing, like the presentation, you know, where it's like your personality plus whatever you're presenting is like what impresses people or doesn't impress people and what communicates your vision. And even Carlyn, you were telling us that one of your treatments was being passed around Hollywood because it was so effective at what it set out to do. And other people looked at it as an example.
Funny story. I didn't get that job. So pretty cool. It's for a movie that I didn't get, but it is. But also quickly, in commercials, we call them treatments, but in features, we call them lookbooks. Just
right.
For the
or like a pitch deck. Yeah. Or a presentation.
Carlyn, elaborate on that, because I think in features, often a treatment can be a totally different thing. Basically.
A treatment can be just a 3 to 5 page Word doc.
Like a synopsis.
Yeah. So and like my team, they know that I do a commercial, so I think they now know that sometimes I mix the two up, but it's a lookbook. You know, like they wouldn't, nobody in like the film TV side calls them treatments to my knowledge.
Right. But you know that commercial treatments.
If you talk to a doctor, they're very confused.
That is true. They're like, the treatment.
Yeah. But commercial treatments used to be like those 3 pages of text describing how you would shoot a commercial.
Sure.
But now they've turned into these like visual 25-page visual presentations. Yes. And we all have to do them because we know that whoever we're pitching against is also doing them. Anyhow, I was curious about you guys because, you know, we all do commercials and it's easy and it's a 30-second format. So we'll just start talking about that. When you get a script, maybe you get some other materials, some boards, some references, whatever. What's your first step to making your treatment?
I almost always write it first.
But what do you write?
What do I write? My process is you'll be shocked. It's very high tech. I write it on a piece of paper. No, I'm just kidding. I do Google Slides, and I like for each commercial, you know, it has you need sort of different pages. So there's always the same ones, but like I'll do like an intro page and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of map out the look and feel. I'll just kind of jot down notes. And so my first pass is a very kind of messy, like here are some references and just kind of like each section, like tone, casting, look and feel, location.
Do you have
whatever.
Those 4 in every treatment pretty much that you just mentioned?
Pretty much. Yeah. And sometimes I do wardrobe, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do edits, sometimes I don't. Sometimes music, sometimes not, just depending on the job and whatever's special about the job.
Can I ask a technical question?
Yeah.
Do you finish in Google Slides as well, or is it just there for organizational purposes for you?
I do, but you know, maybe it's like uncool of me to admit this, but nowadays I don't design my own treatments. I'm just being honest.
It's very cool.
It's honestly, I'm very cool.
But literally deciding what like the pages is part of the design. Like you're saying, you're not laying out like
that's true. I'm not doing the layout. I don't do the layout, and I usually have someone pull images for me, and I also pull images.
Do you pull yours first to show them an idea?
Yeah, or if somebody is pulling images for me, I will guide them. You know what I mean? I'll be like, this is the kind of I will send them very specific things to pull. And if there's some general stuff I need in the pull, I'll be like general, you know, wide angle close-ups of children, whatever. I guess that's pretty specific. But the treatment designer will take the Google Slides once that's finalized and, you know, design it into the treatment. But yeah, the production company I'm with has people we use. Yeah, we have in-house resources. And honestly, nowadays when I do them on my own, I'll pay someone because they're better at it and they're faster than me, and I am busy, you know. That's life.
You're talking about you pay someone for the images or for the layout, or you hire one person to do both? Okay.
Usually, I always definitely pick up at least some percentage of the images. Like I don't feel comfortable letting someone pick out 100% of the images, but it's usually a collaboration. But on feature lookbooks, I do pick out 75+% of the images because those are pretty specific.
When you're getting sent images and they've laid them out for you, it's so much easier to see what bumps for you.
Yeah.
Right. Like saying yes or saying no to an image is equally important, but like sometimes just having it presented to you makes it easier to.
It's much less stressful.
Yeah.
But I mean, even creatively, you just, because you've sort of in the back of your head sort of crystallized what it is you're looking for, it's easier to say yes or no. Whereas like when you're slogging through every image that's ever been on the internet or in a book or scans or your personal whatever, you know, it's really hard to have any objectivity about it, basically. And that, to me, that's honestly like when having someone pulling images for you, it's that objectivity that you're kind of paying for, along with layout.
Yeah, and they'll send me like 300+ images, and I'm only going to pick 40 of them or 50 of them. You know, so it's so pretty quickly you could be like, no, that's interesting. Yes, no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know you're different, Oren. You do your own treatments.
I've been working with layout people a lot.
Yay!
Of these last 4 treatments I did.
Yeah, you just can't do 4 in a week. That's crazy.
My approach is pretty much like yours, Carlyn. I'm assuming, Matt, you're probably pretty similar way. I use the Notes app on my phone because I like to do it kind of like just while I'm like at a restaurant or something. Like I don't want to have Google slide
strip down.
And first I make a list of references, even like as I'm talking to the agents here, figuring things out. Which, by the way, for features and kind of longer form narrative stuff, I find it much more difficult because the casting starts becoming an issue in your images, where in commercials, it's never an issue.
Can I say, actually, in terms of image pulls for features, I've started leaning way, way harder into fine art, especially fine art photography, is just so much easier. You just mitigate all of those problems. Everything's about tone. Everything's kind of like, has more negative space, so you can write on it a little bit easier. Like pulling a bunch of frames from your favorite movies, you could end up in that sand trap.
That's really
smart.
smart.
Where do you find these fine art?
It's a little harder. You have to if you have any artist reference, or even like if you go on like Pinterest and find a seed and realize
this photographer.
And then you start Googling, and then you see their gallery displays, and those are often really high res. Or sometimes it's even Instagram, things like that as well. Like when I say fine art, they don't have to be showing in, Milan right now. It can be something like on Instagram or something. But and then that kind of, it's like any sort of research. Once you kind of find the thread to pull, you can kind of continue to find it.
We had 2 different guests that did that for their treatments, both really incredible treatments that led to movies. And that was Don Luby and Jocelyn DeBoer, right? They referenced a lot of fine art photography. And also the It Follows treatment is filled with all amazing photography from a specific photographer.
Similarly, if you just have like one person over and over again, it's like, okay, well, you're just cribbing this person's style.
Right. Something I've done recently, a lot of times when I'm pitching on commercials, I get told who I'm pitching against. And a lot of directors are also photographers. And so if I happen to look one up and I see that they have amazing photography, I'll like bookmark it as like, ooh, this person's really good at photographing people or products or cars or whatever. And I know that it's not going to be a frame that other people have unless I'm pitching against that person.
I lost out on a pretty big job a few months ago to a director photographer.
Kara, my wife, got her headshots from this photographer. I forgot her name, but she photographs like all these UCB people and comedy celebrities.
Robin Von Swink.
Oh, Robin Von Swink. Uh-huh.
And I think she directs a little bit too. And it's like, you already see she has these amazing relationships with funny people. Like, of course, that's going to be a leg up. Anyway, I think the reason to have like these sections in my notes for the treatment is because it takes the stress off. I have an intro. I have something about tone or performance. I have something about the script and the story, and then kind of the location, the camera work, lighting and texture, whatever. And as I get deeper into the treatment, I'll start changing those the headings, instead of intro, I'll call it like a deep dive into cleaning or whatever, like whatever that treatment's about, I'll try to craft it to be that. But then I know that I can like even start laying out my treatment before I know exactly what my idea is, because then I just start filling out the text and then I start finding images and they give me ideas and I start watching references.
Yeah.
So that was has been my approach for the last like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. And it works okay, but I'm thinking of totally changing that approach and starting from a different place, which is taking the script that the agency sent, the commercial script, and just writing out a shot list, figuring out what I actually want to shoot and then starting to find images and references. And obviously that might change things, but the whole like section of like tone and performance and location and wardrobe, I find that I'm like writing so much like fluffy language about like, oh, this location should be lived in. We'll feel the characters are really there and we'll do that. But like at the end of the day, it's like, we're going to have a shot and there's going to be a refrigerator and there should be a magnet on it that says this thing, like home, sour home, whatever, and like, those are the details that actually matter for the final product, much more so than like all this BS stuff you're putting in there to make it sound like you care, but really have no idea. And I've seen Jordan Brady do these like video treatments where he just talks beat by beat of how the commercial is going to look and feel. And I'm like, oh yeah, now I totally know what the commercial is after he talks like that. Whereas my treatments, I'm just kind of hedging. I'm throwing every idea into the mix in case one of them resonates, and that means I'll get the job. You know what I mean?
I do a little bit of that too, because it's like, well, that's the game. That's what they expect.
I feel like I'm sometimes in conversations with people about the difference between, the type of filmmaker who is really results oriented, who's like, look, this is how the spot's going to be really good for these reasons, and here's how each element is going to implement, and it's going to do this for your product or whatever. People are going to walk away knowing the name of your product much more than they did before, having a greater affinity for it, or your clicks are going to grow up or whatever. And then there's the agency game of just like, we are the most creative, this is the coolest, right? And there's advertising is that weird back and forth between like, it's immeasurable how good of a job we're doing, but trust us, look how cool our haircuts are. Check out my tattoo. And then the nerds who are like, no, trust me, it's going to work. These are the reasons why this joke is going to land, etc. And like, you kind of have to, I think we're all as directors, a little bit of both of those people, right? We have to be practical. We have to get it shot. We know how much daylight there is in the day. And also maybe we should all get tattoos. I don't know. Or at least look cool. Carlyn, you look cool.
Yeah, I was like, do I look cool? It depends on the day. I don't have tattoos.
You have some good set selfies though. Do you know what I mean?
I do have good. I try to look semi cool on set.
It's 90% the just shoot it hat.
Yeah.
I did wear a just shoot it hat one day on the Nike set, and a PA came up to me and was like, I love that podcast.
No, seriously?
Yes. No, she was not a PA. She was a second AD.
Ooh, even better.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm
awesome.
I'm on it. And she was like, really? I haven't heard of you. And I was like, I know, it was great.
For a second, I was jealous, and now I feel better.
And you don't actually love the podcast.
I know. She was like not impressed with me. It was great. I think when I started commercial directing, I thought that you were supposed to look just kind of like an agency bro. Like you're supposed to look really approachable and kind of like generally acceptable. But I don't think that anymore. Now I'm like, oh, you should have some sort of point of view in your style, truly just to make people think you're cool. Because who fucking cares? At the end of the day, if you do a good job, it doesn't matter. But if it helps you get the job, put on some cool printed pants. You know what I mean? What do you have to lose? Anyways, that's my cynical LA rant on looking cool.
I think that's totally true.
Well, and also
I don't do it at all.
To be fair, Carlyn, I think that you're just... You like looking cool, and it's not like you bought that outfit for the shoot.
No, I did.
I
did buy something. I did buy some stuff for the Nike shoot. I did because I was on set so many days, and I had to wear a lot of Nike. And
sure,
there's so many young people on set. I bought some Gen Z pants is what I called them.
Wait, what?
Because they're high waisted and they look like Jenkos. Like I looked crazy. I really thought I looked really crazy, but the kids loved them. I got many compliments from young people. I do think that talking about what to wear on set is valuable. I'm not saying it needs to be said in this particular podcast, but it is.
We're off topic,
but it is something that I thought about all the time. And maybe it's like slightly a gendered thing, maybe not. I don't know.
I think you're right, 100%. I think it is slightly gendered. However, Oren and I have felt confused about what to wear for sure.
I love the vulnerability.
And also, we've all had that thing of like having to tell people that you're the director.
Yes.
And like, if you look cool, if you're not wearing work boots, which is what I like to wear on set because I like to be in the shit, you know, that you're sending signals to people of like, hey, this is where I am in this workplace environment, basically. You know, it's a version of wearing a suit or dressing up in some way, you know. So I think that there is a lot of different complicated, nuanced aspects to it, but that it's all valuable to think through and decide for yourself. Certainly. I'm going to go buy a bucket hat.
Honestly, I'm this close. That's the one thing I haven't done is a bucket hat. I'm like, I just can't do it. I just am like a little too old for that.
All right, and get us back on track.
Let's touch on feature treatments for a second. Let's talk about the layout a little bit, like what a treatment looks like. Obviously, there's images you pull. I had a designer work on a treatment, and we all felt collectively like it wasn't it was supposed to be a comedy treatment, and the design and the layout was not funny. And so I think this applies not just to commercials, obviously it features, obviously everything. Do you guys ever think about what tone your layout and your treatment design is telling, and what are some of your techniques for that?
Font to me is the thing that tells you what tone we're doing, and like layout, it's maybe the finer points that are a little lost on me.
Font and color, I think too. Those are two big ones. And I know a few years ago, I'm assuming it was a few years ago, we talked about treatments, and Oren was really anti-GIF at this point.
Let's take a survey across the three of us for both lookbooks, aka feature treatments, and commercial treatments. Yay or nay on GIFs? I'm yay for both.
I'm big hell yeah for commercials. For features, I have not done GIFs yet because it feels like a more like serious medium, even though I'm only making comedies. But I don't know, but that could change.
I was anti-GIF. Then I started seeing these agency decks, like usually Google Slides and things like that, that had some really good GIFs in them. And I was like, oh, I guess that does really...
It really conveys the shot, too. Yeah.
And then I saw a treatment from Carlyn, actually, a few weeks ago for your Nike job. I was like, damn, this is like so good. Of the 4 treatments I just did, 3 of them had GIFs.
I just want to take a moment to relish this moment where I taught Oren something. Not that I didn't teach you, but I helped convince you. And that is very special to me. Thank you, listeners.
For comedy, especially in commercials, the GIFs really do a lot of work for you.
Yeah. And especially on that Nike job, so much of the comedy was camera movement and angles and stuff. So there's just no better way to nail how I'm going to do that.
Yeah, or just explain what you're talking about.
I just want to come back for a second to the comedy versus non-comedy, and I imagine this would also apply to horror versus non-horror, or tech versus non-tech. Like, obviously, the typography is like huge, right? You would choose some font for your title font that implies the tone. Matt, do you also do that for the body text, like basically all of your writing?
Well, my body text legibility becomes a much bigger question mark for me. I think like my title text, I go hard style. You know, that can be that can have a real flourish to it. It still needs to be legible, but like, you know, I think that there's a lot more latitude there. But as soon as you start trying to write anything, you know, in a paragraph, all the swirls or the jagged lines or the textures or whatever, all that stuff just becomes untenable. So I do like to have a really, really clean body text, but also I've been bumping up against deciding on how to pick the subtitle text, like the header text, I guess is maybe the better way to say it. So like, it's not the big splash image titles. It's like I'm breaking up, paragraphs or
Sections,
you need to call out things in sections in some way, whether it's bolding, italicizing, or a totally different font is hard for me to decide.
Yeah, that's why I love like the professional, like a Futura or Avenir Next, or even a Helvetica New. You have like all your different weights, so you can do like an extra bold or bold in a bigger size.
Yeah, but then it doesn't feel like, I think to your previous point, Oren, like there's a lot of personality that you're imbuing. So like, if you're sticking to one font family for the entirety of the piece, that looks more professional, certainly, but maybe you're kind of losing out on some of the
personality.
There's this font, Bebas, Bebas, New.
I like Bebas New. Yeah, sure.
And it's like a comedy font, but it's like a super clean, crisp sans serif font that like works perfectly, I think, with like a Helvetica or something. So yeah, there's some finesse to it. But to me, the other like big trick to make something a comedy treatment is just don't put it on white,
Yep.
Just choose a color and make that your background and make your text white or black, depending on what color you choose. Anyhow, so those are my thoughts on tone and treatment. I thought we can close out this segment by just looking at our Twitter questions real quick, because we did ask listeners if they had any questions about treatments, and we got a few. Carlyn, the first question.
All right.
Tony Gapastioni asks, what's your top essential element that must be in a treatment? And what's your above and beyond element if you want to get extra credit with execs? And what should definitely not be in the treatment? And I think he's more focused on narrative stuff too.
Top thing that must be in a treatment. I guess base level, when you glance at it, you need to get a sense of what the movie's going to look like. So that's maybe the most important thing just from the get-go.
Do you think it's important to start with like the log line, like kind of by page 2?
It depends. Like I'm pitching on another feature in a little while that the company developed the script. So I'm not going to tell them the log line and the lookbook. But in my personal projects, like my spec scripts, yes, I do have a log line and synopsis.
Well, what about Tony's other question? What should you definitely not include in the presentation? Obviously it's a very open-ended question, but I would not talk too much about like gear, When I do the casting section of a feature lookbook, I sometimes keep it a little bit vague, to be honest. I keep it like character driven, but I do not bring up specific actors. So I would not bring up specific actors in Hollywood. The landscape of features right now is so attachment driven for actors that first of all, you're going to be sending this shit to a bunch of actors. And so if they see somebody else in the lookbook, they're not going to love that.
If we were like, Oren, we love you for this role, and then we send a document with a bunch of other people
like
in it.
Matt Inlow, he's Oren's, like, what the heck?
Yeah. It was like, what? That guy?
Yeah, it's just a little bit dicey. Yeah. Like casting is just really tricky. And so I think that I'm not saying you can't have like, in my Caitlin versus lookbook, I definitely have pictures of like Reese Witherspoon, but I also for like the picture of the main character, I actually have a picture of like young Hillary Clinton. That tells you a lot about who that character is, but it's not an actor.
You had young Reese Witherspoon from Election next to Hillary Clinton. So there's something connective. It's not like you're being like, I want Reese right now.
But I very purposefully...
You want Reese from 1997.
But I didn't put any like pictures of the leads from Booksmart because this was also a high school movie with girls in it. And so I just didn't want to draw that comparison.
On my feature, I have pages of potential cast, and it's more of an investment thing.
Right. Totally. That makes sense.
It's specifically so that people get an understanding of the level of talent. Right. You know what I mean? If you're looking to buy a movie and I'm like, yo, we're going to get Brad Pitt and then we get
Brad Schmidt.
And so that means different things for your budget and for the type of movie that you're making, basically. This says something about their character, but also about how established the talent is. And
I would just stick to like, when you're talking about characters, stick to like, you can talk about archetypes in movies and TV shows, I think, and like, those roles, but I wouldn't talk about actors outside of roles that they're playing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, yeah.
I would say one other thing, and you guys might think differently about this, but I would not like make character pages that just have a ton of writing on them.
I totally agree. You know what I do, which people can steal, which I don't always do this, but I often put like the name and then like 4 bullet points about them, kind of like a yearbook kind of style thing. Like, you know,
favorite band. Yeah.
Or just, but like quirky stuff. You know what I mean? Like, loves ramen, hates pho. I don't know.
Next question from Derek Aiello, an old member of the podcast. Derek asks, what are films, videos, and commercials that you love that have great blocking? To me, it seems a little tangential to treatments and things, but I actually, 3 of my 4 treatments that I had to write last week were mainly about blocking, like interesting blocking and having like a lot of interesting things happening in the background. So I actually talked to Matt a lot about references for good blocking and just a lot of things happening on camera. And so the most obvious, I think, director is Wes Anderson. He's constantly got a lot of people doing a lot of things. I think the movie Roma, which was directed by Cuarón, he does like a lot of cool world building in the background of his shots. Obviously, Fellini in 8.5. What's her name? Celine Sciamma, in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like there isn't that chaos, but the blocking is like every frame is like a masterpiece. Do you guys like care about blocking and treatments and presentations, decks and things like that?
Presentations, I think that kind of oftentimes falls into the gear category in so much as all of it is important and valuable. But if you start talking specifically about the blocking, if you say blocking in a sentence, you're maybe dead in the water. As a person who's made people's eyes glaze over with technical talk one too many times, I just try to personalize it or humanize it in a way, basically.
Yeah, I have not talked about that in treatments to my knowledge. I think I've talked about how to use extras. I guess that could be blocking.
Sure. Yeah. It's all mise en scène, right, guys?
Well, so Riley B has some really funny questions. I'm just going to read all of them in a row.
Boy.
Riley asks, what is the all-time most referenced image in commercial director treatment history? How many times have you used it? And is it of Joaquin Phoenix and Her? I think I might have.
I actually have used that. Literally have. I have used that. I love that movie.
Really?
Yes.
You love
I
Her?
do. Yeah.
Really?
So
that's interesting to me.
I love Spike Jonze.
I don't. Me too. I love Spike Jonze, and that one's not
really.
Not for me.
I love it, man. I think it's just beautiful to look at too, and like it's fun. It's fun really to think about a future that's not completely dystopian.
Basically, I'm almost always pulling like a couple Coen Brothers movies and like Scott Pilgrim. There's a few kind of basically any director that has like really big visuals that I tend to also use. I lean on pretty heavy.
Riley asks, what phrase have you recycled the most?
Active camera.
I say something about performances a lot, that they're like grounded in reality, like the world is heightened.
Then Riley says, how many lies have you told on your intro page?
Well, I can think of one.
Oh, that you really love, whatever it is you're pitching on?
No, I used an anecdote that was not mine. It was Alex's.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think I don't even remember what job it was, but I was like, oh, something specific about like somebody running over like a statue at Abuela's, and I just pretended like it was my story, that kind of thing.
I had this phase where I really tried to find a personal story to open up every treatment with. And recently I've been doing more like general, like, I really don't like it when this happens. And I feel like other people or we all love this thing, like more of a collective experience as opposed to like, I grew up in Orange County, so I love oranges. Like I've kind of abandoned that.
Yeah, starting with an insight of some sort, I think is worthwhile.
I tend to do some like funny personal anecdote, and that becomes like a runner throughout.
There was a spot once where the gag was that the ID photo that they had taken was bad. Like they were sneezing in the middle of the ID photo. From my high school days, I have my student ID and I wore the same shirt in every single student ID photo. And I used that and I have them still and showed them as my intro. And I was like, well, I'm not going to top that.
That's perfect. And you got the job. And the Nike thing, I also had a GIF of me hula hooping with my niece and like a Target, because I said something about like, I'll play with the kids. And I was like, oh my God, I have a video of me like playing with kids in public, hula hooping. And it's silly and I'm laughing. And
no, that stuff is definitely good when it's real, like what you guys are describing. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 last questions, which are kind of the same one. So I'm going to read them together. This is all from Riley. This is the best question. I should have only included this one. Riley asks, how confident are you that you can pull off what you're promising in your treatment? And how much of the heavy lifting do you let your treatment do once the job has been awarded? Do you feel like your keys, like the heads of your departments, can work competently off just your treatment?
Important follow-up question. How confident are you that your keys look at the treatment at all?
I'm pretty confident. I mean, basically just the DP and the production designer, and then hopefully wardrobe, makeup, costumes and makeup also. But I mean, who else really needs to look at it?
Yeah.
I think it also depends on the budget and how much time you have, if you can pull it off.
I pitch a lot of ideas in the treatment, and I know that at the end of the day, we're going to be able to do one of them. So sometimes maybe the agency's like, I thought we're going to have a confetti explosion after every line. And I was like, well, that was like an idea, but then you told us we have to shoot all these TikTok videos too. So, well, Riley, thanks for the questions. These are really, really good. I think the best thing I got out of Riley's question is just kind of the commiserating on this idea that we're just like selling so hard in the treatment. And it doesn't always line up with like the reality of a production. Our last comment comes from Jordan Brady, who wants to remind everyone that he has a Director's Treatments Unmasked course that you can check out. And because he's a friend of the pod, we're gonna mention it. He did phrase it in the form of a question, Jeopardy style, but it's basically a plug for his treatment course.
Talk about a great segue into additional unpaid endorsements. Unpaid endorsements. I'm going to kick off. I got a good one. So let me ask, are you 2 Wordle people?
No.
I played Wordle twice and I got the word right on my second. Basically, I put in one word. It gave me whatever the feedback, and I got it right on the second time. And so I have like a perfect two-word record.
Okay, so the fun of Wordle is texting other people the Wordle, right? That's the nice part about it. My wife and I do it together. She texts her sister back and forth. But have you ever thought to yourself, boy, Wordle is fun, but what if it were about movies instead? Have I got the game for you? It's called Framed. Framed.wtf. You have a single still from a film. You guess the title of the film. It gives you 6 different frames, and you go from there, basically. Dang. It's powered by ShotDeck, which is one of the resources that we all use to pull stills for treatments, which gives us a leg up because we have a strong familiarity with the sorts of films that are available in the ShotDeck index. It's really fun. I really like it.
Nice. That's a good one.
That is a good one. I am going to recommend this book, which seems like a self-help book, and technically it is. It's called Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. But I'm recommending it specifically for character development.
Oh, interesting. Little curveball there. I like that.
Obviously, I'm perfect and I don't need relationship help, but I do think it's really helpful because this attachment theory is basically how your relationship was to your primary caregivers and how that affects you as an adult. And so when you're developing characters, there's different types of attachment style, and it's just really helpful to like dig, deep. Like in my Netflix movie, the main character's his flaw is that has a savior complex. And that is not me at all. Like I have the opposite of a savior complex. I'm like, screw you. You can figure it out. So it's been helpful that those chapters in this book to kind of understand like what he's going through. But it's really useful, I think, for character development overall.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
What's it called again?
Attached.
Attached. Cool.
What about you, Oren?
Well, I endorsed something before after only seeing a couple episodes, I'm doubling down on Severance. I finally finished it, and it's just like such a fun ride.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the final episode. Definitely needs to come back for season 2.
Yeah, it left a bunch of open-ended questions. Hardly a finale.
Yeah, but
I will say that.
But it gives a lot of answers too. Like it's not, the show is not satisfying. It's not just a bunch of mysteries with no answers. So
I don't know anything about this show. I know the casting.
I think that's a good way to go into it. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, it's great.
So I'm also I learned something. This isn't really an endorsement, but I guess you're not supposed to take NyQuil if you have kids. Anyone tell you this before?
No.
So I took NyQuil. You know, was a little sick a few days ago to get a good night's sleep. And in the middle of the night, my wife woke me up because our dog needed to be taken out. And I was like, what? I just took NyQuil. I was like, I could not move. I could not walk. She's like, you are not supposed to take NyQuil if you have children. I was like, how do you learn these things?
I never heard that.
And I guess like, because it knocks you out so hard. If something like, if your kids are crying or doing anything, like it's just like you will have no idea. So, and the last tip, just because we talked about treatment so much, and something we got on our podcast pitch deck was, even if you're telling a dark story, like I think if you want to sell it and you're using images, try to include something hopeful, you know?
Yeah.
Like hopeful imagery. They can be dark, they can be desaturated, they can be like teetering on the edge of failure, but hope is something that helps get things made. And I've seen so many treatments that are just like, oh, this is the worst place and the worst person and the worst thing. And it's like, everyone's going to die, you know? And it's like, just remember to balance like all the dread and the darkness with some light.
I like that sentiment. I would adjust it slightly to just make sure that your treatment is true to the story that you're telling. If there's no redemption, right, there's no hope in your film, I can think of a few treatments where the films are just super bleak, and like there's that deck, you know.
Yeah,
that's a hard movie to sell.
Yeah,
it's a hard sell. So maybe Oren's really saying rethink your ending.
Yeah. It's pretty unlikely that you have something really, really bleak, but I can think of one treatment in particular, one deck, that the movie doesn't end very nicely, and neither does the deck.
What are you talking about?
It follows. There's no happiness in that deck.
Oh, that's true.
But anyway, Carlyn, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're always a delight to have on.
It's just so y'all can roast me about my technological ineptitude.
No, Carlyn, that's not what we're saying. I promise.
Can you tell that I feel self-conscious about that? Because sometimes, no. This is. I don't mean to hijack the ending here, but it is like, you know, we all bring different tools to our craft, and that's been something I'm like, one day I'll learn more about VFX, and basically I just call Oren and I'm like, how do I do this shot?
Well, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Just give it a goog. No, Instagram.
That's something you picked up on set.
Yep, that's what the kids are saying.
No, they don't.
No, you always do this wrong. Okay, my Instagram is Carlyn Hudson. It's truly just my name. My Twitter, which I don't really do anything with, is Hey Carlyn. But just go to Instagram.
Well, you can find out more about this episode and this show and us at justshootitpod.com. You can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. You can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/justshootitpod and even get one of those cool Just Shoot It podcast hats that Carlyn has been wearing on set and just becoming super popular with. And you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at @okaplan, and on Twitter, I'm at SmiteyPyleg.
And I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow across all social media. And you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.